What's going on, good people? Welcome to another edition of On Course with Hart Ramsey. Of course, these are conversations that we have where you get to hear the heart of God by way of the man of God. My name's Gerard Bonner, but you never really come to see me or hear from me because who you really want to hear from is Pastor Hart Ramsey. How are you, sir?
I'm doing good, Gerard. How you doing, man?
I'm doing okay. I'm doing okay. I'm doing okay. You know, one thing about this podcast, and I think all year long it's happened, is the church never fails to give us topics of conversation. They never ever, I mean, from the start of the year through now, it is a consistent kind of thing. And it always gets interesting when things that happen seemingly in a church find their way out to the larger public and end up being topics of conversation in mainstream marketplaces. And such was the key that happened just a couple of weeks ago. There were two incidents that happened in two separate places that we'll get into. The first one was wildly popular. It involved a Houston pastor whose name we all know at this point, basically in the middle of a worship moment, telling one of his parishioners who was on stage to be quiet.
Yeah.
And that clip went everywhere. The Shade Room found itself on Tamron Hall, all of these places. And to no one's surprise, there have been polarizing opinions on this. Some thought he was absolutely right. Others thought he was absolutely wrong. You're a pastor. I'm certain you've run across very similar situations across your time as a pastor. What did you think of this situation and how it was handled?
Well, first of all, I think I know the pastor, of course,
Mhm.
and you know, when you see the clip, initially you don't know what to make of it. First of all, there's no context involved. It's a clip.
Right.
It's not context,
Right.
and it's for likes. They posted that particular portion of the clip to get the reaction that they got. That
Right.
being said, that's the way these people make their money.
Absolutely.
But the people, for the most part, you have two types of people that are criticizing the way he handled it. Number one, the people who don't go to church.
Mhm.
They don't understand that space. The second group of people are the people who come to church, but the Bible describes them as unruly, which means that they don't like rules. They don't like order. They want to be able to come and do what they want to do. They want to lead, but they don't like leadership. And
Mm.
it's in a space like that. So the way I perceived it was initially when I saw it, I said to myself, knowing this guy, he's mild mannered for the most part. Something had to happen. I think his interview with Tamron Hall was telling. What I loved about his interview is that he was prepared for the questions.
Mhm.
He presented well, and he gave a narrative of a 4 year discourse, a 4 year, not discourse, but 4 year problem with a particular member who waits till the moment gets quiet and then draws attention to herself. As a pastor, you will not believe how many times we have to deal with that thing. And it's a spirit.
Mm.
It's what it is. It's a person coming to church and doesn't understand the concept of weism, and feels that everything should be, if they don't feel like they get enough attention, otherwise they will steal the moment of worship and draw attention to themselves as the most prominent worshiper, as the loudest praiser. They may have an apparatus like a tambourine or cowbell in some situations, whatever it is, and they try to make themselves known. Or in one situation I was involved in, Gerard, this young lady will try to outsing the entire congregation. She'd be so loud that you have to stop and say, "Who's that?" Because
Wow.
her mama told her that she was all that, and so she came to church every service to prove it. It's aggravating. It's
Wow.
agitating. The spirit of God. It's hard for you to get in the spirit when a person is trying to suck all the attention out the room. All
Mm.
of all the worship that goes to God, they want to be in the spotlight. So of course, knowing the way I just explained it and even ranted a little bit, you could tell it's aggravating. I've had to deal with it. I had a lady that used to wait until I got up to preach and
Mhm.
start hollering, ah, ah, every Sunday morning. And because I loved her
Wow.
son-in-law and her daughter, she would do this. And so I was kind of standing there waiting, and she would do it. Then she'd start making state like, what was her thing she used to say? Uh, can't nobody stop my praise? Things like that is, I honor God and not man.
Wow.
Not only she's adding injury to insult, and I'm up there just waiting and being patient with her until one Sunday I said, Mother, stop,
Mm,
stop and sit down.
mm,
And she said,
mm.
I can't believe you. No, 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 no. You've been doing this for years. I'm
Wow.
ready to preach. I need you to sit down. So she
Wow.
never came back. All right. But
Mm,
come to find out that she wasn't as holy as she was letting on.
mm.
See, she's coming to church and acting out, but out
Sure.
there she was. So again, normally when a person does that, there's an underlying issue that has little to do with worshiping God and has a lot to do with this person's need for attention, this person's need for validation, this
Mhm.
person trying to establish themselves as a prominent worshiper in the congregation, and it's all meism, it is flesh. That was like a 10-minute answer to a
No, no, no. It was part of the reason why I think your perspective is important is, you know, it's very it's very presumptuous for people who have never sat in that seat
yeah.
to have an opinion about something that they've never dealt with, you know. And there are a lot of lay members and people who aren't going to church who have strong opinions about this, but
Yeah.
they've never sat in that position where they had to figure out, what do I do in the moment, you know?
It's difficult.
Do yeah, yeah,
What's
it's got to
difficult
be
about it,
challenging.
what Pastor Keon said to Tamron is the name.
Mhm. Yes, Timon.
I thought it was so profound. He said, like, even right now, if someone started clapping, someone will stop the person.
Right.
Because what we try to do is that there's an era in the body of Christ where we teach without words that spontaneity is spirituality, and it's not true.
Mm.
Matter of fact, when you look at the prototype of worship in the Old Covenant, in the Old Testament, God did not, the fire did not fall from heaven to consume sacrifices until the sacrifice was set in order.
Wow.
Right? God
Wow.
said, you set the sacrifice on order, and not only that, the altar had to be to specifications.
Right.
It couldn't have any chipped or cut rocks. It has to be. You see what I'm saying? There's so much that God required of worshipers that had to be on point in order for Him to even acknowledge that what we were doing was an act of worship.
Yeah.
But now, today, it's like people can just come in and do what they want to do, and we're not good pastors if we don't let them just take over the service and treat us like trash. Oh, and
Mm.
by the way, and not get paid for what we do. And the enemy hates the church.
Mhm.
He hates the church. People who have come to church and had bad experiences hate the church. People who don't get to do it, they hate. And so we have to deal with all this. And I'll be honest with you, I actually, I commend him.
Okay. Okay.
Now, well, we got to address another part, Gerard. And here's the other
Yes.
part. There's a group of people that accuse him of not. They agreed with him, asking us to stop.
Mhm.
But then these super spiritual saints believe that the work was undone because he did not cast the devil out of her. It's like you can't win.
Oh, wow.
So their thing is he
Wow.
should have cast the devil out of her. Suppose you didn't want to stop the worship of God, the spirit that was in the moment,
Mhm.
to give extra time to cast out the devil or
Mhm.
right there on the spot. How
Mhm.
many times did Jesus come to church on a Sabbath day in the synagogue, and the demon possessed man that he actually ended up casting the devil out of? How many Sundays or Saturdays was he there?
Right.
So we think because the Bible documents it is the first time he saw the demon. No, sometimes you go through a whole service, man, there are demons in every church every
Wow.
Sunday.
Wow.
And if we stop to cast them all out every Sunday, we won't do nothing else but cast out devils.
Then there's that.
So somebody gonna put something in the comment, and I'm here for it.
Yeah.
Come on with it, because I'm ready for this conversation.
Yeah. So on the same day, which was so crazy to me, that was in Houston. On the same day in Pennsylvania, there was another pastor who was up, and this pastor was in the middle of preaching his sermon. And during the sermon, a man walks up to him with a gun and points the gun and pulls the trigger. The interview that would happen afterwards would say that where the pastor realized that the reason he didn't get shot was because the gun jammed up. But the person who came and tackled the gentleman who was the gunman was the cameraman. And we all find this out again because it streamed. Completely different scenario, but a challenging scenario in and of itself. What do we make of of that? Because
Well,
that seems nuts. And it's certainly not the first time this year that something like that has happened.
so and we're gonna see a lot of this. So I think that churches don't take security seriously enough.
Hmm.
There's a guy standing behind the pastor. I saw this clip, and
Yeah.
he didn't move. This guy
Did
came and
not.
stood. He was frozen. The
Hmm.
cameraman had the presence of mind to come and tackle him. The
Right.
jammed gun is a recurring theme. I don't know if you remember years ago, a guy stood to shoot John Hagee, and the gun
Wow.
jammed. And so
Wow.
I believe that what we call in the natural realm, the gun jamming is an angel actually just um tampering with the device before he pulls the trigger. The angel of the Lord protected this pastor,
Yeah.
and which means, and it says to pastors, you can't be just living any kind of way because God is not obligated to protect you if you're just up there flim flamming.
Hmm.
So I'm not saying that the pastor was spared because of his righteousness. I'm simply saying that we have to be mindful that these things happen. Now, for me, so people would know, my guys have a shoot on sight policy.
Hmm.
So when I'm in the pulpit, right? Um, unfortunately, and I got my piece, and I mean, we always packing.
Hmm. Hmm.
The first lady be over there smiling on Sunday morning. She got a whole
Wow. Wow.
situation up there that's always loaded and ready to go, and she's trained.
Wow.
But the sad thing about it is that people don't honor and respect the things of God anymore. There's enough footage out there of people slandering the church, calling it different things, accusing men and women of God of being fake and phony. I mean, there's been people just. I'm gonna be honest with you. But most of us preach because we're called.
Hmm.
But even outside the scope of preaching the gospel, we serve the Lord because we're saved and we want to be saved and we want
Right.
people to be saved. We
Right.
really believe that there's a heaven to gain and a hell to shun. I believe that. And so in the process of doing that, I believe the Lord is going to protect us as we pray. But there will be situations when, like the situation in Pennsylvania, where I believe the people who are security,
Hmm.
you can't just be up there again for show.
Right.
You
Right.
got to, and I think sometimes churches position the security in the weirdest places. Your security can't be just up on the platform looking out like that.
Right.
And then people want to be known for their title. So you walk around all, no, you need to be incognito.
Yes. Yes.
So people,
Yes.
you know, this guy should have, when this guy walked out to the front, somebody should say, hey, what the pastor's preaching, why is he walking
Right.
up there?
Right.
No
Right.
one checked it.
No one.
He was able to produce a gun. He pointed the gun, he aimed it and pulled the trigger, and no one responded.
Nope.
Unacceptable.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not the will of. And then people say, well, so the Lord protect his people. Listen to me. Study the book of Acts. The way the gospel spread, Jesus said, you be witnesses unto me in Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and the uttermost parts of the world, right? Check it
Right.
out. How did the gospel spread to those places? Through persecution.
Mm.
Herod was killing people. And
Right.
so
Wow.
James, the brother of John, was the first one killed. He
Right.
arrested Peter, was going to kill Peter, right? And so the whole premise is, yes, God will protect his church, but we have to use prudence and wisdom.
Yeah.
Okay, the Bible talks about a prudent person will see the danger coming and he would avoid it.
Right.
And so our security, to me, man, that was a failure and a great success, because the failure was on the part of security, but
Right.
that cameraman saved the day.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so it leads to an interesting question. And I mean, it's a very layered conversation in terms of where we could go from here. But what struck me on that particular day is that both of those incidents were streamed live.
Yeah.
Streamed live, whether it was on YouTube, Facebook, any of those particular places. And the bulk of what we have seen go viral this year have come from services that have been streamed live. And it really caused me to ask the question, is it time for church services to no longer be streamed live?
Man, Gerard, listen. So let's talk about that.
Let's go.
I believe that although there's a convenience in streaming live,
Mhm.
there is a element of performance that comes into the worship service when people know that they're streaming live.
Mm.
Do you remember there was a incident at a Super Bowl?
Uh-huh. Oh, yes.
It was the what do they call it? Uh,
A wardrobe malfunction?
that's the term I'm looking for.
Hmm.
The
Yeah.
wardrobe malfunction.
Yes.
And different people saying different things about whose fault it was, but what the networks did was they built in a thing called um, streaming delay, like
Yes. The
30.
7-second delay. Yeah.
Right. It went from
Mhm.
7, and some places it's 30 seconds.
Wow.
And what they're
Wow.
trying to, because they realize that there's some things that are said
Hmm.
and some things that are done that we want enough time to grab them before the people see them.
Yes.
When a person knows, if a person wants to make a statement and they want to reach an audience, all they have to do is go to a church with a camera
Absolutely.
and a
Absolutely.
live stream. And this, we would have never known what happened in what was it, Philadelphia?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Right outside of Philly. Hmm.
Right, in Pennsylvania, we'd never know what happened
Right.
had this church not been streaming live.
Absolutely.
I really think the question that you asked is it time to rethink that? Yes, I think we should. I think certain services should be live and some should not. I'm a
Mhm.
proponent personally for recording a service, editing the service, and then streaming it maybe a couple days or even a week behind. So if people
Yes.
want to watch online, they're going to watch last week.
Right.
Now,
Right.
so right now, I am in our situation at churches, the churches that I cover, we all stream live.
Hmm.
I think NCC may be a week behind. I'm not sure, but
Okay.
I know at Hunger Church we stream live,
Yeah.
and the great thing about it is, if you're a member and you're following a series, you get to keep up with it.
Right.
But back in the day, I don't even remember this. We didn't go live when it first came out until the word started.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So
Right.
I remember back when we first started streaming. You remember it was a thing called Streaming Faith?
Yes. Oh, yes.
That was the
Wow.
first. That was eons ago.
It seems like
Streaming
so
Faith,
long ago. Wow.
right? And
Jeez.
so here's the thing: we could not afford to stream the whole service because it was expensive.
Right.
So we
Right.
will get an hour and some change, maybe an hour and 15 minutes, and we start streaming. We say they count me down. When I come up
Yeah.
to preach, I say go, and I start preaching when the stream started, welcoming the
Yes.
online audience and all this stuff. I really believe that some people may disagree, and I really understand it because it's very subjective as to how you see it. But
Mhm.
when you look at what people are trying to do in churches based on the fact that number one, they will have this captive audience, I think we need to rethink how we do the stream.
Mhm.
If nothing else, we have to rethink how we do it.
Yeah. Yeah. What's so interesting to me is there were a percentage of churches that were already streaming prior to the pandemic. I know
Yeah.
you were one of them and several others. But once the pandemic hit,
Hmm.
that's where all of a sudden most churches had to stream because it was the
Yeah.
only level of connectivity that they had with their parishioners.
Right.
And I just find it interesting that during the pandemic, for instance, everybody wore masks, people were getting vaccines or not, and all those things. And as the concern has started to subside, and we've gone back outside, we don't see very many vaccines anymore. We don't see very many masks, if any. But
Right.
yet we're still streaming in the same or similar ways
Right.
as we were before. I don't think many churches understand why we're even having this conversation,
Oh.
because some are just like, well, all of the churches are streaming right now. That's what we have to do to reach that particular audience. But there's an interesting study that Pew Research did. They did the survey November 22, but they came out with it June of last year. And basically what it said is that 43% of Americans are attending church, be that in person or virtually. But the people who were attending virtually were the people who were already connected to the church.
Right.
So in other words, the streaming concept was not being properly used and isn't being used to expand the
It's not
church.
evangelism.
It's not, which is
Well,
wild to me. Go ahead.
so okay, think about it like this. So outside of the possibility of a crisis in my life or some kind of conviction or something going wrong, if I go to the club on Saturday
Mhm.
and come in at 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm not gonna get up in the morning to watch your stream.
Right.
I watch television, if I'm gonna get on my phone, I'm going to TikTok. I'm saying if you're not saved.
Right. Right. Right.
So,
Right.
I get the mentality. I do get the mentality of a person saying, "Well, what do we want to be there for when that person is in crisis? So when the Lord does touch their heart." I get that, and I put that to the side.
Yeah.
I buy into that.
Yeah.
The problem is, I think the church, what we tend to do is we're not as creative as we could be, because really what we're doing is playing follow the leader. So we're not innovating. So,
Exactly.
so I'm gonna give a good example. So right now we're preparing, we're buying a building, and so I went out there. I kind of scoped the joint, I cased the neighborhood where the building is, and I'm looking at what the needs are.
Right.
Every time I've been out there, I've seen homeless people.
Wow.
Twice I've been out there, and drug addicts have walked up to me on the street asking for money. They received prayer and some money, but I realized immediately that a lot of our effectiveness is not going to come from streaming.
Wow.
Matter of fact, let me say, I'm gonna share this. I think it's gonna help somebody watching. Years ago, Apostle Nate Holcomb, before he passed away, was on television everywhere. His broadcast was called "It's All About Him."
Mhm.
And I remember one year he called me and he said, "Hey, Hart," he said, checking on me. But in the conversation, he said, "I'm coming off of national television."
Hmm.
So I asked him why. I mean, I said, your broadcast is doing well. I mean, people are just starting to hear about you. He said the Lord told him to take the money he was paying, because he was paying BET, he was
Wow.
paying TBN. He said the Lord told him to take the money he was using for broadcast and invest it locally, build
Wow.
housing, build. So he took that money, right? And that he was not streamed, but he was on television broadcasting,
Mhm.
and he
Mhm.
started putting it into the local work. He
Yeah.
disappeared from the national scene, and people start saying, "What happened to Apostle Holcomb? We missed him so much." And people thinking, ministers were saying, "Well, that's a fail." But then when I went to
Mm.
Texas and saw what he was doing, I'm like, "Oh my God!"
Wow.
He repurposed the finances in a way where he was able to impact the local community. I think a lot of churches that streaming don't need to stream. What they need to be doing is looking up in their neighborhoods to see how can we, because again, the point that you just brought out is that streaming is not evangelism. It's not
Not being
outreach.
used that way. It's not being
No, it's
used that
not.
way.
It's
Yeah.
not. And we call to evangelism. Go ahead. What were you going
Mhm.
to say?
No, I was going to say, and I think part of the reason it's not used that way is because, to your point, there isn't innovation.
Yeah.
Here's the one of the issues when it's come to streaming, and I'm so glad you actually mentioned that example with Apostle Holcomb, because what people don't understand is streaming is TV. It's TV. So what happened with the pandemic is churches who never thought outside of their four walls were suddenly thrust into TV.
Hmm.
And in being thrust into TV, they had to learn a lot about camera shots, production,
Yeah.
all of those things. And most of these churches don't have TV savvy people in there, which
So the
which
broadcast was
means
horrible.
yeah, so it looks horrible, it sounds horrible, but then they also don't have anybody to say what's proper for us to show and not show.
Right.
So there's this assumption that all elements of our service is available and understandable and digestible by the masses. And
So
that's not the case.
and I agree with this. So now this brings us to a question.
Mhm.
The question is, should if we're streaming and something goes left, what
Uh-huh.
is the responsibility of the media ministry as far as protecting the church? I know of a
Right.
situation. I know of a situation some years ago where a pastor, um, something happened. Something happened, and the pastor was in the pulpit, and he was saying something, and what he was saying, it wasn't being communicated in a way where the media department is like, wait a minute,
Mhm.
this doesn't. I wonder if he realized what he just said.
Right.
Media director calls upstairs and say, cut the feed.
Mhm.
The guy said, well, he
Mhm.
said, cut the feed right now.
Mhm.
They cut the feed, and after they cut the feed, the pastor kept on talking, and it got worse.
Wow. Wow.
So people were like complaining, what happened to the stream? It was about to get
Mhm.
good. No, it was about to go left.
Right.
The director got in trouble The pastor didn't appreciate it, but the board members did.
Wow. Wow.
The board, that media director saved the day.
Absolutely.
Come to find out that the
Absolutely.
pastor was ill, that something was happening with him, and
Oh,
he was
wow.
just talking out of his head.
Wow.
See what I'm saying? So the media
Yeah.
director saved the day. And so what
Yeah.
I believe is, there has, like, for example, there's some footage that's being released even after the fact.
Hmm.
And sometimes, watch this. Sometimes it's not that it's streaming live.
Right.
Is that the person who edited it think it's a great idea?
This is what I'm talking about. This is exactly that, because there are not people that are going into these churches and saying, here's what our standards and practices should be. These are
Mhm.
the kinds of things that should be released. These are the kinds of things that should be kept in house. Because from where I sit, and it's interesting, you guys have rocked with me for a long time. So, I love technology. I love us being forward thinking, and I love seeing how technology can impact faith-based spaces. But I think we have to acknowledge that turning a camera on and live streaming a sporting event, live streaming a concert is different than live streaming a church service.
It is.
It's different. Church services, there's a culture in church that most people outside of church don't understand. Quite frankly, most people inside of church don't understand, right?
Mhm.
There's still explanation that needs to happen. So if you take any 30-second clip of a concert and release it, people automatically get it. You take a random 30 seconds out of a church service, it could be completely misconstrued.
Right.
And that only happens when that footage gets released. This is not like rogue people are coming in there and streaming it. We're the ones that are streaming it and releasing it with no explanation. And I
Right.
think that has potential to be very dangerous,
Mhm.
not just for your brand of church, whatever that might be, but for the body of Christ at large, because most people aren't going, I'm not going to go to that church. They're going to go, I'm not going to the church.
Yeah. Well, let me say this. Going back to the first scenario that we started with, people don't realize that, even okay, if they, even okay, the people don't watch the live stream. Most people that are unchurched don't watch it.
No,
But when it comes up as fodder and salacious gossip or slander against the church, it goes viral and everyone sees it, right?
right.
Because it's only a clip. But those clips are very instructional.
Yes, they are.
So there are people who believed, as far as the Pastor Keon thing was concerned, there are people who believed that that woman was just doing what we do in church.
Right,
Because they have learned through some device, they have learned that that's what happens in church. And it's not. That is
right,
not the Holy Spirit.
right.
The Holy Spirit is not out of order. And everyone goes to Acts chapter 2, where the Holy Spirit came in like a Russian mighty wind. Okay, well, first of all, that was the day of Pentecost. That was the birthday of the church. And they were up there waiting for that to happen. It was
Right,
expected to happen.
right,
Okay?
right.
But after that, we only see one other time, really, where the Holy Spirit came in with that level of violence. That was in Acts chapter 4, when Peter and John were released from being beaten for healing the man at the gate called Beautiful in Acts chapter
Right.
3. In
Mhm.
Acts chapter 4, they come back to their own company, they take hands, they begin to pray, and God shakes the place, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't say that it wouldn't happen, but we know that something turbulent happened. Of course, we have other incidents where at Cornelius' house in Acts chapter 10, we have the situation of Paul and Silas. So we see situations like that, but it's not the norm in the church setting
Right.
where there's chaos and pandemonium. Matter of fact, in 1 Corinthians 14, Paul says the opposite, that in the church there should be order and peace and decorum.
Hmm. Hmm.
So what we do in church is when that camera is panning, we actually, it's not just the preacher or the worship leader that's educating, because everything we do is edutainment to these people.
Right.
They're being entertained by it to some degree, but they're actually learning from it. All right.
Yes.
And so what
Yes.
happens
Yes.
is, when you have a wild person on there cutting a fool, and it is not checked, then people learn that's the way they behave in church. And then they may say, well, I don't want that to happen.
Right.
That's irritating me right now. Like for example, let me tell you my little story. I was pastoring in Germany,
Hmm.
and this lady will bring her baby to church every Sunday, not fed.
Oh, wow.
She get herself together, she rush out, and then she'll come to church And when her mentality or strategy was, I'll sit down and while pastor's preaching, I'll feed my baby. So the baby will be in this her little carry thing on the pew, right? And she's worshiping and she's praising. The child has not eaten.
Wow.
And then after worship and everything is finished, while she listens to the word, then she will feed the baby. Well, some Sundays the baby was not having it. That baby will start crying, and she had a plan. So her plan was, I'm gonna get my praise on and get my everything. Then I'm gonna feed the baby when pastor's preaching. And that child would cry through the first part of my message every single time, and people be sitting there like rolling their eyes. And so one Sunday, in aggravation, I said, Mama, take your baby outside.
Yeah.
Do you know people got mad?
Wow.
First of all, the saints were so relieved, but there were people who were visiting. They felt I was so out of order, and I wasn't mean. I said, Mama, please.
Right.
I said, take the baby outside.
Right.
I saw one of the ushers, why don't you go help her?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
We deal with this all the time. People don't understand how church works or how it's supposed, and then to present it to the world like that, it's a mistake.
Yeah. Yeah, and you're right, because the education that's happening, for people who are coming to church, who don't understand, okay, this is the space where we do XYZ, and this is the space where we do XYZ. And so if they don't understand, there has to be a moment to teach them.
Yeah.
But if the cameras are on and it's being broadcast to the whole world, who wants to have a teachable moment in front of the world?
Right.
So, I don't want to completely dissuade people from broadcasting content. That's not what we're saying. So let's talk a little bit about what should happen in terms of how should a church approach streaming, presenting content and things of that nature, if it appears as though streaming live could be dangerous or way too unpredictable.
Well, I think what's important is you have options of streaming certain parts of the service.
Mm-hmm.
Then the number one thing to me is you capture the footage, you edit the footage.
Yes.
For time's sake and for propriety, making sure it's right.
Right.
And then after you do that, then you release it as a full service to as much as you want to release. And then I think you should take certain clips of your pastor or a leader who is speaking and present those in bite sizes for people who can't handle a full message.
Right.
Because people get a lot of the edification just from little things we say. Everything, it's like meat. When you buy a nice steak, you want some marble in it. That's fat. You want some fat in it. But fat is not meat. It gives it flavor, but it's not meat. It's like our messages as well. I mean, a lot of our messages are like those steaks that have the bone in it. So you have a lot of marble in it. It's fat. It's just, it's stuff to make it taste good. It gives it flavor, but it's not necessarily nutritious, right? And I think that the people who edit should be able to distinguish between not just fat and meat, but good fat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because some fat is not good. Some fat, you end up spitting it up, wrapping it in a napkin and throwing it in the garbage. Say, that was horrible. But some fat that's in there, just gives it this nice, I think every story is not for the masses. Right. And that's why I call fat. Every rabbit trail is not for the masses. Sometimes we need to edit those out. Or if it's good fat and it has good flavor, then you take that and you use that as content.
Yes.
I think what's missing from the church, and many churches don't have the budget for this, but I think you need a good editor.
Yes.
That's aware, not a television editor, but a person who's familiar with how the algorithms and the attention spans and the different social media things go, so that they could properly represent the church. Because I'll be honest with you, and there's some people who always post their praise breaks. It's a mistake.
Agreed.
Nothing is as misunderstood in a church's stream as the praise break.
Agreed.
Because to you it's cool. Mm-hmm. But the people who don't go to church is stupid. It's like, what are you doing?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? People, I disagree. You have the right to disagree, but it don't make you right, though. People see it and people go, what are they doing? I really believe that we're better served posting stuff that's more curated. Mm-hmm. for the people we want to reach, curated um, for those who may see us and not know us.
Right.
How do you want to be known? For praise break?
Right.
You know, some churches post the band jamming.
Hmm.
Okay, you know it's funny. Go to any jazz concert, you're gonna find a band that's good or better than what you see in church.
For sure.
People believe that church musicians are dope. Don't get me wrong, but the
Hmm.
bottom line is, if what I'm looking for is music, I don't have to come to church for it.
That's true.
You know, I can find music basically anywhere. We gotta do better. We gotta
Yeah.
think it through.
Yeah, and I think that is the space is you really do need dedicated resources to what does our online presentation look like. It cannot be just turn the camera on and go live.
Right.
That is dangerous on so many levels. And I really believe, this is not a one size fits all. And what I mean by that is there are churches with more resources who have the ability to record their service, edit their service, and do all the things that we mentioned and release it at a certain time that makes sense for them. Most churches in America, are not mega churches, and
Right.
thusly they don't have those kinds of budgets. So I think it's wise, if you're a church that's wanting to grow, you need people who can advise you in terms of what to release and what to keep. You
Yeah.
know, what, I will just say, after what we've been seeing, I don't believe every church needs to stream.
No, I agree.
I don't, especially live,
Yeah. Well,
I-
this church was the particular church in Philadelphia. I mean, in Pennsylvania. They
both
were
of these
street.
were streaming live. Yeah.
Okay, but do you notice in one of them, it appears, and I may be wrong, correct me, that the one where the shooting, the potential shooting took place,
Yeah.
the pastor didn't have a mic.
I couldn't tell if he had a mic or not, but I could definitely tell that even if he didn't, it was a very small place.
Right, but
So,
if you go
yeah,
back and watch the footage, it sounded like he was projecting into the room,
interesting.
and that the mic on the camera was picking him up. He didn't have a. I saw
Wow.
no. He definitely had nothing in his hand. He was speaking
Okay.
both his hands, and I don't think he had a lavalier. And if he had a lavalier, it was poorly EQ'd or EQ to pick up the room and the audience as well.
Right.
It sounded more like a camera mic, and then
I don't
we
doubt
a
that.
whole other conversation about the proper equipment and you
Mhm.
see. So
Which goes back to the fact that churches were thrust into television
yeah,
and they weren't prepared. And so I really think that now might be one of those moments where, if you're a pastor or you're in the media team or whatever, and you are having this question, should we, shouldn't we? Maybe this helps you in terms of figuring out, what do we need to do? I definitely think there needs to be an entire department dedicated to what your social media presence is and really being able to monitor what gets released from the house,
yeah,
because you end up being your best or worst advertisement.
that's good.
And you can really turn people away by having a poor stream, poor sound, poor quality. If you're not ready, it's okay. If
Right,
you're only ready to focus on in person, that's okay. But don't allow this technological gift to become a curse to you because
right,
you don't know how to accurately use it, and
right,
ultimately damage the body of Christ at large.
right.
So yeah, I wanted us to have. Oh, did you have something else you want to say?
Just one more thing, and it was, I was actually feeling some questions yesterday, and someone asked me, could I address some of the stuff, the doctrines and stuff that they're seeing on TikTok?
Mhm.
So, one of the things that the church has to be aware of is that a very vacant space for the church is non theological, not non-theological, but non-churchy content on the spaces where people are attacking the church. For example, we need the biblical scholars in church, the theologians, to have space or footprint on TikTok to refute some of the damnable teachings that they're bringing to these kids, telling the kids basically that Christianity is a lie. I saw something last night where someone was reading on TikTok from the book of Solomon, the book
Mm.
called The Wisdom of Solomon, and actually what they were reading was spells.
Oh wow.
They were reading spells, and they say, "Well, they hide these books from you because they don't want you to see how to protect yourself from demons." Has it ever occurred to you that some of those books were written by demons?
Wow.
I'm saying now, don't get me wrong. I believe, see, what we do, and I got this is a whole nother conversation, but what we do is historically, we act like God has no power and no say so into what was presented to us as the Bible today in our
Mm,
part of the world.
right.
Yes, in Ethiopia I think they have 88 books or 84 books, but the bottom line is that's what they're over there. And
Right.
if you ever went to the continent of Africa, the spiritual activity over there is way, way higher than it is here in the West. It's a
Yeah.
different battle over here.
Yeah.
We act like that men are just doing things and God has no say so in it. So these apocryphal books. Now I read the book of Enoch and I read different books, and some of the stuff I it's weird.
Wow.
If you read, okay, yeah. So we'll talk about that another time. But I'm saying
Yes.
that when the church actually does enter the streaming or the online arena, there's a footprint that's missing from us, and it's not church service. It's not a 2 3
Yes.
hour church service. It's sometimes it's a minute and 30 second or even 10 minutes worth of content refuting some of the foolishness that's
Yeah.
being propagated as truth on these
Yeah.
social media platforms.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man,
So
you and we're probably gonna have to cover all of that in a future episode because we are missing in that digital footprint, and what we're filling it with is not something that's filling the gap at
no.
all. And one other thing for people to consider, if the world and the average person doesn't sit down and watch a 2 hour movie, why do you think they're going to sit down and watch your 2 hour service? Just going to
Right.
drop that there
It's
because we're not thinking when we're releasing this content. We're
mm-mm.
just going for broke, which is all the more reason why perhaps an edited presentation should be released. I know you guys have thoughts about this. So feel
Bring it.
free to, yeah, please, please. We want to continue the discussion because it's a very important discussion to have. It really, really is. So feel free to reach out to us. Use the hashtags on course or heart to heart. Also, if you want to reach out directly to Pastor Hart Ramsey, at Hart Ramsey is how you can find him on the social spaces. Bring whatever comments you have and ideas. We'd love to discuss them and get your further thoughts on what we have talked about today, because I think it's super important for churches and everybody considered. Make sure you subscribe to this podcast because we have more of this kind of thought-provoking content that is there. And join us next time as we get on course with Hart Ramsey.